in the city of New York. Her 23 memoir, Wave, recounts her experience in the 2004 tsunami and the progression of her grief in the ensuing years. It won the PEN Ackerley Award in the year 2014 and was shortlisted for the year 2013 National Book Critics Circle Award. In the recent past, she has been expressing her concerns, insights, and opinion on the economic crisis in Sri Lanka through various platforms. Without any further ado, let me now invite the chief guest of today's occasion, Dr. Sonali Deraniyagala, to address the gathering.
இன்றைய நிகழ்வின் பிரதம விருந்தினராக அழைப்பை ஏற்று இங்கு இணைந்திருக்கும் பொருளாதார நிபுணர் மற்றும் எழுத்தாளர் கலாநிதி சொனாலி தெரணிகல அவர்களை உரையினை ஆற்ற அன்புடன் அழைக்கின்றோம்.
ආරාධිත දේශනය සඳහා අපගේ මේ ගෞරවනීය ආරාධනය ශ්‍රී ලාංකික ආර්ථික විද්‍යාඥ ආචාර්ය සොනාලි දරණියගල මහත්මයාණී ඔබතුමියටයි.
Thank you to the Human Rights Commission of Sri Lanka for inviting me to give this talk. Thank you for Farah in particular who invited me. I'm very happy to be here. Thank you. Today I want to talk about the impact obviously of the economic crisis on women in Sri Lanka. And I'm asking kind of two questions. One is, where are we at 2 years on in 2024? Where are we at today in terms of the economic crisis? And in particular, what does that do to the lives of women? What does where are we at mean for the lives of women? We talked a lot, Justice Dehedeni as well, about transformation and what can be done for transformation. What I want to go back a little and see, what is the real situation before we can talk about transformation. So that's what I'm going to speak about. I have to change glasses. Now we all know that in 2022 Sri Lanka faced an unprecedented economic crisis. Okay, it was a collapse. The economy totally collapsed. And we know what it looked like. We know it looked like long queues, days-long queues, power cuts, shocking increase in prices, shortage of essentials, medicines, fuel, and so on. Sri Lanka is a middle-income country, and that resulted in a catastrophic fall in people's living standards across the board, and especially for middle-income and low-income earners. Now today in 2024, there's a lot of talk among economists about stabilization. We talk about the economy has stabilized to some extent, and is this going to cause an upward trend in economic growth, in economic development, and so on. Now, stabilization is a good thing, and it means essentially that prices have leveled out or they're not galloping like they used to. And it also means, in essence, there's a little bit more foreign exchange in the economy. But for a large segment of society, of course, conditions, I think, in 2022 are worse than they were in 2024, are worse than they were in 2022. So in a sense, we have a new crisis in the country, a new crisis, I'd say, of poverty, and a new crisis of vulnerability. So what I'm going to argue is that, or I'm going to try and show data for, is that the Sri Lanka at the moment could be experiencing development going backwards, or a reversal of development. And what do we mean by economic development then? Economic development is multifaceted. It means many things. One is, of course, economic growth. That is just the increase in output or the rate of growth of GDP. But apart from that, now it's widely recognized that development must include poverty reduction, improving human development like education, health, and so on. And also, very importantly, reducing income inequality, as well as reducing gender equality and sustainability. So if you take development as a whole, I would say that if we look at many of these other dimensions of development, there is evidence that actually we're having a reversal at the moment, that development is going backwards in several dimensions. So I want to focus today about what this means for the socioeconomic position of women, and also I'm going to look therefore at just two dimensions of development. Okay? So the first is poverty, and the second is going to be inequality. So since 2022, there appears to be in Sri Lanka a reversal of poverty reduction, a reversal of the progress the country has made in poverty reduction. Now, poverty, again, has many aspects. There are many aspects to poverty. Okay, the most straightforward one, the easiest one, is income poverty. And how do we measure income poverty? We measure it as the percentage of the population who have incomes that are insufficient to meet basic needs. So there are various kinds of poverty lines. There's a World Bank line, there's a national line, and so on. Now, if you look at income poverty in Sri Lanka, what we see is a huge jump in 2 years. So in 2022, the poverty rate, which measures income poverty, that is the percentage of households who have incomes below this minimum level required to meet basic needs, has more than doubled. Okay, so the figures are in 2022, it was something like 11%, and now it's 29%, nearly 30%. So it's a more than doubling of the poverty rate. So what does it mean for income poverty? It means that about 3 million additional people have been suddenly, in 1 year, pushed into poverty, to income poverty. Now this is unusual even globally, because in most countries of the world, an increase in poverty, say during COVID, you'd have a 1% increase or a 2%, maybe 5%. But this doubling of poverty rate, so we're having a 14% increase, a doubling of poverty, is very, very unusual. Okay, so other examples could be Lebanon, maybe Zambia, but we are an outlier in that sense. Now, what does it mean for women? Typically, poverty data is not disaggregated to look at gender globally, because you look at the household. It's the household that is a unit of measurement. And globally, what we see with data is that women and men are equally distributed in the poverty, people under poverty. So women make up 50% of the world's poor, or maybe 51%, and men make up 49 to 50% of the world's poor. Often you might hear a statistic saying women make up 70% of the world's poor, and that's what we call a zombie statistic. That's wrong. It's a statistic that however much you try to kill it, it keeps rising up again. Having said that, there is a very important point to make, that typically women in the age group 25 to 35 and women over the age of 60 have much higher poverty rates than men in any age group. So when we say that the poverty rate in Sri Lanka is nearly 30%, when we say that 3 million additional people have fallen into poverty, it is very likely that this affects women much more than it does men. So there's a very big uptick in poverty, and there's a big uptick in female income poverty. I think we can say that, fairly safely. Now, income poverty affects women in many ways, and one is, of course, through unpaid care work. We have a lot of discussion about the fact that labor force participation rates in Sri Lanka for women is low. That is, women are not actively seeking work or in work. Now, and one of the reasons, if you look at surveys, one of the reasons often given for this low income labor force participation is the need to do unpaid care work. So the Department of Census Statistics does surveys, and it's like 68% of women say we don't work because we have to engage in unpaid care work. Now, so now what does the crisis and income poverty mean for this? It really means there's a lot of qualitative data. We know this anecdotally as well, that women's time use has really changed. Everything takes longer. When you have to cut down on electricity, you're not using your rice cooker. You're not using your washing machine in urban working class households. You're washing clothes by hand. So everything takes longer. You walk your child to school. Without spending on the bus fare. So unpaid care work has gone up. And what will happen with that is women are less able to participate in formal work, in the formal sector, which in turn will keep women's incomes even lower. So this is why I'm talking about a reversal, that we are going backwards in certain very important ways. Now, another aspect of poverty is human development. And again, we know a lot about human development and what it means. Typically, human development goes beyond income to include aspects like education, health. So for people to come out of poverty, it's not only enough to have higher incomes, you need to have better levels of education, more years of schooling, you need to have improved health outcomes, and so on. Now, Sri Lanka, again, has been famed for its, historically, for its high levels of welfare and human development. But again, I think what we're seeing with this crisis is the beginning of a reversal. And again, we're not the only country. There are a few countries here and there, and people are talking about this reversal problem now in economics. And I think we're becoming a very good example of this reversal problem. There's two ways we can look at it. One is that high inflation, and which means reduced real incomes, has led to rationing by households. So households are rationing how much they spend on education, on health. Last year, the Department of Census and Statistics did a household survey. It's called an Economic Survey of the Crisis for 2023. And what they found is that 55% of children and young people said their schooling was affected. In 2023, this is, by the crisis. Of that, 53% of households said they'd cut back on buying school books and stationery. About 40% said they reduced expenditure on tuition classes and so on. Similarly, there's rationing in healthcare. In that same survey, about 35% of respondents said that they wait a long time before seeking healthcare. They take less medication. If they have to buy it privately, they take less of the medicines that were prescribed, and so on. So all this means that human development seems to be slightly, the beginnings at least, of deterioration, or it could be. Another important source of understanding this human development outcome is the UNDP did a study which came out again at the end of last year, where they computed a vulnerability index for the entire population of Sri Lanka. So it was called a multidimensional vulnerability index. And that index looks at what people are lacking, or vulnerability, not only in terms of health and education, but also water, sanitation, debt, losing of assets, adaptability to climate issues, and so on. So a broad range of issues. And it was done through a citizen survey of 25,000 households, so that's quite big. And what they found was that 56% of all Sri Lankans are multidimensionally vulnerable. Now that's a big number. 56% are extremely vulnerable in this country. So for a country that supposedly had high human development levels, we are now seeing something, I think, quite startling. And then there are regional differences in, say, Keynote district. That number is 70%. So 70% of that population is multidimensionally vulnerable in income as well as in so many other ways. Now,